So what I want to go over now is how to solve a system of equations using Gaussian Jordan elimination. Now this method is very similar to Gaussian elimination, it's still in its name, but the main difference is that you'll be able to actually solve the variables by putting it in reduced row echelon form. So what we're going to do is still the same process. We're going to put the system of equations into a matrix. You guys should be awesome at doing by now. So now, with the Gaussian Jordan elimination, it's very similar, as I said before, about the Gaussian, where you get the ones as a diagonal, and then you still have that bottom left corner being zeros. But in this case, with Gaussian Jordan elimination, we're going to get zeros on the top right corner as well. And so this will allow us to realize that there's only going to be a single variable in each one, and that'll set up an equation where we'll have numbers here, here, and here that will represent the solution for x, y, and z, or your three variables. So our first step is we need to get a 1 in that top left corner. Now notice two different ways we could do this. We could either take the first equation, multiply it by a half, and you'll get a 1, -2, 2, 6, and you'll go from there. The other option is if you look at the second row, we already have a 1 there. So we could just theoretically switch the two. Now, I've done one where we switched before, so I'm just going to stick with that method. We're just going to take R1 and swap it with R2, so which we're allowed to do. So the first equation now, or the first row, will now be 1, 2, 1, -5, 2, -4, 4, 12. And then the bottom one will remain the same, 3, -3, -5, 20. So we have the 1 now. Our next step is to get these zeros here. So what we're going to do is we are going to take a look at the second row. So there's 2 and 3 I want to make into zeros. So we look at the top. I have a 1. If we multiply the first row by 2, row 1, multiply row 1 by 2, and subtract row 2, and put that new result in row 2, we'll be able to get that 0. Similar to that, if we do 3 times row 1 minus row 3, and put that into row 3, we'll have our zeros in for 2 and 3. So I'm going to do both of these at once. Row 1 remained the same. Row 2 will become, well, now we're going to do 2 times 1 minus 2 gives me 0. 2 times 2 minus -4 gives me 8. 2 times 1 minus 4 gives me -2. And 2 times -5 minus 12 gives me -22. Good. Now our next step is going to be to take 3 times row 1, subtract row 3. 3 times row 1 minus row 3, so 3 times 1 minus 3 is 0. 3 times 2 minus -3 is 9. And 3 times 1 minus -5 is 8. And 3 times -5 minus 20 is -35. Sorry, I had to do it in my head. Now, we have our zeros, so we're good with that. Now, still the next step, our goal is to get that diagonal of 1s and that bottom left corner to be zeros. So now I want to get this to be a 1. And I'm sorry, that looks like a 0 now, but I want to make that 8 into a 1. Now, you could look at the second and third equation and see which one would be easier to make it into a 1. If we have an 8, -2, -22, as I divide by 8, I'm not going to have all integer values. So I look at the bottom one, I have 9 and 8 and -35. So if I divide everything by 9, that's not going to help either. So you're sort of stuck between a rock and a hard place. You're going to have to start using fractions. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply row 2 by 1 over 8. And even though I said the evil words of division, they technically it technically does not exist. So 1, 2, 1, negative 5. Then we'll have 0. 1/8 times 8 is 1. And then negative 2 times 1/8 is negative 1 over 4. Negative 22 divided by 1, times 1 over 8 would be negative 11 over 4. Now you didn't have to reduce it. I just chose to because I think it'll be a little bit easier. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you reduce it or not. We didn't do anything to the third row, so he's just going to stay the same. Now our goal of getting that 1, sorry for the delay. Our goal of getting that 1 has been met. Now our next step is to get this 9 into a 0. So what we're going to do is we're going to take row 2, multiply it by 9, and subtract row 3. That will be our new row 3. So the first row will remain the same again. Trying to get a little redundant. The second row will remain the same. And our third row, we're going to do 9 times 0 minus 0 gives us 0. 9 times 1 minus 9 gives me 0. And 9 times negative 1/4 minus 8, that'll give me negative 41 over 4. And then we'll do 9 times, and you can just put all this right into your calculator. So negative 9 times 11 divided by 4 minus negative 35 gives me 41 over 4. Now, just a reminder, typically if you're doing a textbook problem or if you're doing a problem that I'm creating or any teacher creates, most likely the answers are going to be integer values or nice decimals. You shouldn't be any rounding needed and shouldn't be like ugly fractions as your final answer. So if you do end up with an answer that's slightly ugly, maybe you're okay, but if it's something that's completely like irrational, double check your work. Now, with this, our goal is to get this, so we finished getting this 0. Now our next step is to get this 1. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply row 3 by the reciprocal. I'm trying to get this into a 1. So we're going to take row 3, multiply it by negative 4 over 41. And it may seem sort of scary looking, but if you do this correctly, you should end up with nice numbers. Okay. So 2, 1, 1, 2, 1, negative 5, 0, 1, negative 1 over 4, negative 11 over 4, and then row 3 is the one that's going to change, so it'll be 0, 0, 1, and then this will become negative 1. Now, we have just done Gaussian elimination. So we now know that z is going to be negative 1. Our goal is to do Gaussian Jordan elimination. Basically, Jordan came in and said, yo, Gaussian, let's go a little further. So now our next step is to get these two over here to become zeros. Because we have a 1 here and zeros here, it'll be pretty easy to do. Now you want to be careful though, because you don't want to end up making the numbers over here, like in the second column and the first column negative. So you're always going to want to start with the top one and subtract down. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, I'm trying to get rid of this negative 1/4. So as I made this into 1/4, then I can subtract the 2. So we're going to take row 2 and subtract 1 over 4, negative 1 over 4 row 3. And we're going to put that result into row 2. So it's a little bit different, the equation, but for the most part, you need to remember that our goal is to make this guy into a 0. Now, notice it was minus negative. You could have just made that a positive. Now, we need to get rid of this 1, so I'm just actually, since I have a 1 and a 1, we can just do row 1 minus row 3, and that will be our new row 1. So, the third row is the one that's actually going to remain the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to do, let's do row 2 first. So 0, we'll do row 1. So we're going to do 1 minus 0 gives us 1. 2 minus 0 gives us 2. Notice it didn't change. 1 minus 1 gives us 0. And then negative 5 minus negative 1, that will give us negative, negative 4. Okay, now let's do the second row. So 0 minus 0 is 0. 1 minus 0 is 1. And negative 1/4 minus negative 1/4 times 1 will give us 0. Now this is in your calculator, do this last one, so it's going to be negative 11 over 4 minus negative 1 over 4 times negative 1. And you end up with negative 3. And then the last row will remain the same. Now what we just did was we eliminated the z variable in both first and second row. So now you don't have to plug that back in when you do your substitution. And in fact, if you look at the second row, now y is the only variable. So one more step, we need to get rid of, so we got rid of these zeros. Now our next step is this 0 here. So what we're going to do is we're going to figure out the equation. Well, I need to multiply the second row by 2 and then subtract from the first row. So we're going to do row 1 minus 2, row 2, and that's going to go to row 2. Row 1. So we're going to do 1 minus 0 gives us 1. 2 minus 2 will give us 0. 0 minus 0 gives us 0. And I know climb math. Okay. And then we're going to do negative 4 minus negative 3. Negative 4 minus 2 times negative 3 gives us 2. And then the second row is going to stay the same. And the third row will remain the same as well. So right now, we've done the Gaussian-Jordan elimination. You have your diagonal of 1s, your triangles of 0 on the top right and the bottom left. And now this will give us our solution. X is going to be equal to 2, y is equal to negative 3, and z is equal to negative 1. And these come right from that last column. So hopefully you guys found this helpful. If you have any questions, comments, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, good luck with everything. Thanks. Bye.